My name is Emma, I'm 32, and my own father screamed get out and never come back because I chose my passion over his plans. Before I tell you about the morning I woke up to a $32 million wire transfer, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. They say success is the best revenge. It's a nice, neat little phrase you find on coffee mugs and motivational posters. It's something you tell yourself when you're sitting in a dead car on a dark street with $230 to your name, trying to figure out how your life imploded in the span of an hour. But standing here now, on the balcony of my $25 million Malibu home, with the Pacific Ocean stretching out like a vast, shimmering promise, I can tell you it's not true. Success isn't revenge. Revenge is a bitter, fleeting thing. Success is freedom. It's the quiet, unshakable freedom from the voices that spent a lifetime telling you that you weren't smart enough, practical enough, or just plain enough. On my desk, next to a sleek, curved monitor that costs more than my first 2 cars combined, sits an old, clunky laptop. It's a relic from another era, battered and scratched, and its fan whirs with a sound like an old man breathing. Any sane person would have recycled it years ago. But for me, it's a monument. It's a reminder of where it all started, and a reminder of the day my world had to be shattered so a new one could be built. They tell you success is sweet. But they don't tell you about the metallic taste it leaves in your mouth long after the sweetness is gone, the taste of proving someone wrong who should have been your biggest supporter all along. It all began with that laptop. It was a refurbished Dell, a heavy, beige block of plastic, and my grandmother Lillian, my mom's mom, gave it to me for my 12th birthday. She was the only one in my family who seemed to operate in full color. My father, Richard, took one look at it and his face tightened. What's she going to do with that, Grace? Get distracted from her schoolwork? His voice had that familiar edge of disapproval. He was a man drowning in his own unfulfilled ambitions, a regional sales manager at a mid-level manufacturing company who acted like he was the CEO of General Electric. Years later, I pieced together the story of his own failed business venture in his 20s. It had been a spectacular flame-out, and that failure had curdled inside him, turning him bitter and obsessed with the idea of a safe path, a path he had already meticulously mapped out for my older brother, Nathan, and for me. It involved a business degree from a prestigious school, a corporate promotion track, a steady salary, and absolutely no risks. My mom, Grace, just wrung her hands, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times. It's what she wanted, Richard. She's been reading about them. Her voice was a whisper, a sound that had grown quieter and quieter over years of marriage, as if she was afraid of taking up too much space. I often wondered why she never considered divorce, but then I'd see the way she looked at the monthly bank statements, and I understood. He had made her completely dependent. Grandma Lillian, however, was afraid of no one. She put a hand on my shoulder, her grip surprisingly firm. The girl has a mind of her own, Richard. And thank God for that. This isn't a distraction, it's a tool. The world is changing, and she's going to change with it. She leaned down and whispered to me, "Don't you ever let anyone tell you your dreams are silly, Emma. Not ever." That laptop became my portal to another universe. While other kids were at football games and school dances, I was teaching myself to code. I started with HTML, then moved on to JavaScript and Python. The clean, binary logic of it, if this, then that, was a balm to my soul. In the world of code, there were no mind games, no shifting expectations, no emotional minefields. It either worked or it didn't. You found the bug, you fixed it, and you moved on. It was simple. It was fair. By my 16th birthday, I had built my first real app. It was a simple study tool that could scan handwritten notes and automatically generate digital flashcards. It wasn't revolutionary, but it worked, and hundreds of kids at my high school were using it to cram for exams. I was bursting with a pride so pure it felt like it was lighting me up from the inside. I couldn't wait to show my family. At my birthday dinner, I pulled out my phone and demonstrated how it worked. My mom was genuinely impressed, her eyes wide. "Emma, that's incredible. You made that?" Nathan, the golden child, home from his first year of college, gave it a cursory glance. "Cool," he said, before going back to texting on his phone. My father didn't even look up from sawing at his overcooked steak. "Is this why your AP chemistry grade dropped to an A-?" he asked, his voice flat and cold. "Are you spending time on this instead of your actual schoolwork?" Before I could even form a response, the doorbell rang. A special delivery had arrived. It was a large, gaudy trophy from Nathan's college football team for Most Improved Player. My father shot up from the table as if a fire alarm had gone off. The rest of the evening became the Nathan show. My father was taking pictures, calling relatives, his voice booming with a kind of unrestrained pride I had never, ever heard directed at me. My birthday cake, the one my mom had spent all afternoon baking, sat on the kitchen counter, its candles unlit, until nearly midnight. That night, alone in my room, the glow of the monitor lighting my tear-streaked face, I made a silent, furious promise to myself. One day, I would build something so big, so undeniably successful, that even Richard Westfield couldn't dismiss it. I spent the rest of high school with a singular focus. I worked every job I could get, babysitting, tutoring math, building basic websites for local businesses, and I shoveled every single dollar into a secret bank account I called my escape fund. When Grandma Lillian passed away during my senior year, it was the first real heartbreak of my life. After the funeral, her lawyer called me. She had left me $10,000. It wasn't a massive inheritance, but to me, it felt like a fortune. More than the money, it was the note that came with it, written in her familiar, elegant script: "Build something wonderful, Emma. And never let anyone clip your wings." My wings felt ready to soar when my acceptance letter from UCLA arrived. A substantial scholarship for computer science. It was my dream school. My father, however, was apoplectic. Computer science? It's a glorified trade school. Westfields are business leaders, not tech support. He threw another acceptance letter on the table, this one from Northwestern's prestigious business school. This is a real career. This is a path to a real promotion, a real salary. This is where you're going. I'm not paying for you to go play with computers in California. But Grandma's words, and her money, gave me a strength I didn't know I had. For the first time in my life, I truly stood up to him. "No," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I'm going to UCLA. I'll use Grandma's money and my own savings. I don't need yours." It was the first brick I laid in the foundation of my new life, and the first major crack in the foundation of our family. At UCLA, I met Zoe. She was my roommate, a whirlwind of energy and optimism, a digital marketing student from a loud, loving family of restaurateurs in San Francisco. On our first night in the dorm, over cheap pizza, I told her about my dad, expecting the usual "he's just trying to do what's best for you." Instead, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "That's not tough love, Emma. That's just him being a controlling jerk." Hearing someone else validate my feelings so bluntly was like taking a breath of fresh air after being underwater for years. She became my rock, my chosen family. We'd sit on the floor of our tiny off-campus apartment, fueled by cheap wine and Chinese takeout, sketching out business ideas on napkins. That's where the first real concept for an app called Food Saver was born, connecting restaurants with excess inventory to budget-conscious students. When I went home for Thanksgiving during my junior year, I brought a working prototype to show my family. My father's reaction was a carbon copy of his past dismissals. "A glorified coupon app," he declared, waving his hand. "Do you have any idea how many of these things fail within the first year? This is exactly why you needed business school. You don't understand the market, the logistics, the financial modeling." The conversation was over before it began. Then, in 2008, the world economy imploded. I graduated right into the teeth of the Great Recession. The 2 job offers I had lined up were rescinded. A third offered a salary so low it wouldn't even cover rent in Los Angeles. With my savings dwindling and my student loans about to come due, I had no choice. I swallowed my pride and made the humiliating call. I had to go home. The moment I moved back into my childhood bedroom, it was like I was 16 again, only worse. My father, seeing my return as proof of his own foresight, implemented a set of draconian house rules, a strict curfew, mandatory family dinners, a list of chores. He treated me not like a college graduate, but like a failed experiment he was forced to tolerate. The tension in the house was thick enough to choke on. He'd make subtle, cutting digs at my career choice, constantly comparing my temporary, entry-level tech support job at a local company to Nathan's fast-track position at a prestigious investment firm. At least Nathan's putting his degree to work building a future, he'd say at dinner, pointedly looking at me. He's already talking about his 401k and saving for his own kid's college fund. It's called being responsible. I poured all my frustration and energy into my own project. I spent every evening and weekend working on my own security application, a project I was now calling ShieldKey. It was designed to be a simple, affordable, one-click security solution for small businesses who couldn't afford a dedicated IT department. I knew there was a market for it. I was even getting some tentative interest from a few small-time local investors. It was a flicker of hope in the suffocating darkness of my parents' house. I made the colossal mistake of mentioning it at dinner. Most small business owners can barely use email, my father scoffed, not even looking up from his newspaper. They're not going to pay for some complicated security program they don't understand. It's a solution in search of a problem. The breaking point, the final, catastrophic snap, came on a Tuesday evening in June. I was at my desk, deep in the zone, debugging a critical piece of code for ShieldKey. I was on the verge of a breakthrough. I lost track of time and texted my mom that I'd missed dinner. When I finally stumbled home around 9 p.m., exhausted but exhilarated, my father was waiting for me. He was sitting in his armchair in the living room, the house dark except for the single, accusatory beam of a reading lamp. "Your mother kept dinner waiting for an hour," he said. There was no hello. I texted, I replied, my voice weary. I told her I was working. There was an issue I had to fix. "At your real job," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "or at your little imaginary company?" The words were like shards of glass. That was it. Something inside me, something that had been stretched taut for years, finally snapped. The quiet, accumulated resentment of a lifetime boiled over. "My imaginary company has investors showing interest," I shot back, my voice rising with an unfamiliar heat. "Passion doesn't pay the bills, Emma. A practical career pays the bills. Responsibility pays the bills," he thundered, getting to his feet. "Your brother understood that. He has a plan, a future, a stable career. What do you have? A hobby." Just then, as if on cue, Nathan and his wife, Heather, walked in. They froze in the hallway, their faces a perfect picture of awkward horror. Maybe we should come back later," Nathan mumbled, already backing away. "No, stay," my father commanded, his eyes still locked on me, blazing with a righteous fury. "Perhaps your sister could learn something from your example of how to be a responsible adult." A strange, icy calm settled over me. The adrenaline vanished, replaced by a profound, chilling clarity. I looked at my father, at the smug certainty on his face, and I felt nothing but a vast, empty pity. "I don't need to learn from Nathan's example," I said, my voice steady and low. "I'm not Nathan. And I'm not you. And I am done trying to live up to your impossible, suffocating standards." His face contorted into a mask of pure rage. "If you're so confident in your abilities," he snarled, "then maybe it's time you stood on your own 2 feet. Completely. No more safety net from me." "I will," I said, my voice unwavering. He took a step closer, his whole body trembling. He pointed a trembling finger at the front door. "Not under my roof, you won't," he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. "Get out. Get out and never come back. As far as I'm concerned, you're no daughter of mine." The silence that followed was absolute, a vacuum that sucked all the air from the room. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with a familiar terror I'd seen 1,000 times. Nathan looked down at his shoes, the perfect son, unwilling to challenge the patriarch. "Frank, you don't mean that," my mother whispered, her voice pleading. "I do," he insisted, his jaw set like granite. "She wants independence? She's got it. Tonight." I turned without another word and walked up the stairs to my room. I moved with a strange, detached efficiency. I packed one suitcase. Laptop, clothes, important documents. I left the photos, the books, the childhood mementos. They belonged to a person who no longer existed. My mom followed me, her words a frantic, useless stream of pleas. "He'll calm down, honey. Just wait until morning. Please, Emma." I stopped at the door and looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not just my mother, but a woman trapped in a life she hadn't chosen. "This isn't about his anger anymore, Mom," I said, my voice surprisingly gentle. "This is about me finally accepting that nothing I ever do will be enough for him. And I can't live like that anymore." He had screamed something about cutting me out of any inheritance, about taking my name off everything. I just nodded. It was never about the money. I walked out the front door with one suitcase, my laptop bag, and exactly $230 in my bank account. The used car my dad had so generously allowed me to drive, the one he constantly held over my head, sputtered and died 6 blocks from the house. Just died. I sat there in the driver's seat as darkness fell, the streetlights flickering on one by one, illuminating the utter ruin of my life. I was 22 years old, homeless, and practically penniless. It felt like a punch to the gut that stole all my air. I pulled out my phone and made the only call I could. "Zoe? I'm in trouble. Real trouble." Zoe didn't hesitate, didn't ask 1,000 questions. She just said, "I'm wiring you money for a plane ticket to LA, get on the first flight you can." That night, in a grimy, soul-crushing motel near the Denver airport, I allowed myself exactly 1 hour to completely fall apart. I curled up on the scratchy bedspread and cried until I couldn't breathe, until my throat was raw. Then, I got up. I went into the bathroom, splashed my face with cold water, looked at my puffy, red-eyed reflection, and made a decision. I was done crying. I opened my laptop, my grandmother's gift, my only real possession of value, and I started to plan. By the time I landed at LAX the next afternoon, I had sent out 15 job applications and emailed every professor I'd ever had who might have a contact in the industry. Zoe was waiting for me at the arrival's curb, a beacon of sanity in my chaotic world. I slept on an air mattress in her tiny studio apartment, my entire life contained in that single, worn-out suitcase. A week later, a miracle happened. An email from my old computer science professor, Dr. Hayden. A former colleague of his needed a junior developer at a small but growing cybersecurity company called CyberSecure. He had already recommended me. "The interview is just a formality," he wrote. "The job is yours if you want it." I started the following Monday. With my first paycheck, I found a room to rent in a crowded apartment with 3 other people. The room was barely bigger than a walk-in closet, but it was mine. I established a ruthless budget. Half my salary went to rent and bills, a quarter went to my crushing student loan payments, and the last quarter, every single penny, went into a new bank account. I called it my startup fund. 6 months later, I dragged myself to a tech meetup, hoping to make some connections. That's where I met Adrian Wright. He was a user experience designer with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. When I told him about my security app idea, which I was now calling Shield Key, he didn't just nod along politely. He asked probing, insightful questions. Finally, he took a napkin and a pen. "The tech is solid," he said, "but the interface is a nightmare for a non-technical user. It needs to be simpler. Like this." He sketched a new interface that was so clean, so intuitive, it was brilliant. It was the piece I had been missing. We started meeting for coffee. A few weeks later, I proposed a partnership. Your UX skills, my security expertise. 50-50 split. He agreed. The next year was a blur of relentless, soul-crushing work. We both kept our day jobs, pouring every spare moment and every spare dollar into ShieldKey. We refined our business plan, built a new prototype, and started pitching to investors. The rejections were swift and brutal. Too early. The market's too niche. Come back when you have paying users. It was a demoralizing grind. During this time, my mom, Grace, started calling again. I later found out that Zoe had called her and told her what was going on. Her voice was cautious, laced with guilt. Are you okay, Emma? Do you need anything? One day, a cashier's check for $500 arrived in the mail. It felt like my father's money, his pity, funneled through her. My hands were shaking with anger as I put it in an envelope and sent it back. I included a short, harsh note. I need your support, Mom, not Dad's money. I need to know you're on my side. The calls stopped for a while after that. It was a painful, necessary boundary to draw. Our breakthrough finally came from an angel investor named Patricia Lawson. She was a legend in the security world, having built and sold 2 successful companies herself. She understood the market gap we were targeting. After weeks of intense due diligence where she grilled us on every aspect of our business, she made an offer, $150,000 for a 15% equity stake. It wasn't a fortune in the tech world, but to us, it was everything. We quit our day jobs the very next day. We rented a tiny, windowless office in a startup incubator and hired our first employee, a brilliant young developer named Marcus. The next 18 months were the hardest of my life. We were burning through cash faster than we could earn it. There were days I subsisted on nothing but ramen noodles and coffee, days I thought we weren't going to make our next payroll. Then, just as we were starting to get some traction, the letter arrived. It was from a top-tier law firm, representing a much larger competitor, DataCorp. They were threatening a patent infringement lawsuit. It was a baseless claim, a classic bullying tactic designed to bleed a smaller company dry with legal fees. My blood ran cold. A lawsuit, even one we could win, would destroy us. The legal fees alone would bankrupt us in a matter of weeks. Adrian was panicking. We're done for, he said, his face pale, pacing our tiny office. We don't have the money to fight this. We'll have to fold. For a fleeting, desperate moment, I thought about calling my brother, Nathan. He worked at a big investment firm, he knew people, powerful lawyers. He could probably make one phone call and make this go away. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over his contact name. I could hear my father's voice in my head, see? You couldn't do it on your own. You came crawling back. I looked at the old, battered laptop on my desk, my grandmother's gift. Never let anyone clip your wings. I put the phone down. I deleted the half-written email in my drafts. No, I told Adrian, my voice filled with a conviction I didn't know I had. We're not calling anyone. We're not folding. We're going to fight this ourselves. We hired a young, hungry lawyer who was willing to work for a reduced fee and a small piece of equity. We spent the next 72 hours without sleep, combing through our code, our emails, our server logs. We documented every line of code, every decision, creating an irrefutable timeline of our development. We found proof that our core technology was developed months before DataCorp had even filed their patent. We didn't just defend ourselves, we went on the offensive. We published a long, detailed blog post titled "Don't Be a Patent Troll," laying out DataCorp's bullying tactics in excruciating detail, complete with a timeline and supporting documents. The story exploded. It was picked up by major tech publications. The developer community, who hated patent trolls, rallied behind us. #BoycottDataCorp started trending on Twitter. Facing a full-blown PR nightmare, Datacorp dropped the lawsuit within a week. The incident, which was meant to be our funeral, ended up being the best marketing we could have ever dreamed of. Our user base and our revenue exploded. Suddenly, we weren't just a struggling startup anymore. We were the David that had stood up to Goliath and won. The narrative had changed. After we survived the lawsuit, everything accelerated. We were no longer chasing customers, they were coming to us. Our annual recurring revenue crossed the $1 million mark. Then came the first serious acquisition offer. It was from a mid-sized security firm for $2 million. We politely declined. A few months later, another offer came in from one of their competitors, $8 million. They eventually raised it to $12 million. It was a life-changing amount of money. It was tempting. But we just knew, we were worth more. We hired a proper management team, expanded our product line, and our customer base grew to over 25,000 paying subscribers. 3 years after I had been unceremoniously kicked out of my childhood home, an email landed in my inbox that made my heart stop. The subject line was simple, direct, and terrifying: acquisition discussion. Privacy Guard. Privacy Guard was the undisputed giant of the industry, a publicly traded behemoth. Their CEO, James Wilson, wanted to meet with us personally. The meeting took place in their gleaming, futuristic Silicon Valley headquarters. There was no song and dance, no lowball offer. Wilson got straight to the point. "We've been watching you for a while," he said, his tone one of genuine respect. "What you've built is impressive. We want to acquire Shield Key, and we want you and Adrian to come on board to run our new small business division." The offer, $75 million. $60 million in cash, $15 million in Privacy Guard stock with a 3-year vesting schedule. My mind went completely blank. I couldn't hear anything except the frantic rushing of blood in my ears. After weeks of intense negotiations and due diligence, handled by a team of top-tier lawyers and bankers, we accepted. The day the deal officially closed, I sat alone in our now empty office, the moving boxes stacked around me like silent sentinels. I opened my banking app on my phone. And there it was. A number with so many zeros I could barely process it. My personal share, after taxes, after paying back our investors, after everything, was just over $32 million. I just stared at the screen, my hand trembling so hard I could barely hold the phone. 2 weeks later, I signed the papers on the house in Malibu. The first few months were a surreal blur. I hired staff. I learned to navigate my new role as a high-level executive at Privacy Guard. But a strange, hollow emptiness lingered. The fight was over. The struggle that had defined my entire adult existence was gone. And I didn't know who I was without it. Then came the email from my father. The subject line was simply, "Congratulations, Emma." The body of the email was just as terse. "Your mother showed me the article about your company's acquisition. Impressive accomplishment. We would like to reconnect when you're next in Denver. Dad." There was no apology. No acknowledgement of the past 3 years of silence. Just a terse, almost demanding note that managed to be both congratulatory and dismissive at the same time. Against my better judgment, I arranged dinner at an upscale restaurant in downtown Denver. Seeing them again was jarring. My father looked older, his hair almost completely gray. My mother looked smaller, more anxious than ever. Nathan and his wife, Heather, were there, creating the illusion of a happy family reunion. The conversation was painfully superficial, a minefield of unspoken words, until dessert arrived. My father cleared his throat, adopting his old, authoritative tone. "Your company's acquisition, $75 million, the business press said. That's quite an achievement." "Yes," I replied calmly, my voice even. "Shield Key grew faster than even we anticipated." He smiled then, a tight, self-satisfied smile that made my skin crawl. I always knew you had that kind of drive, he said, looking around the table as if accepting an award. Gets it from me, I suppose. That determination to succeed no matter what. The old Emma, the 16-year-old girl with the untouched birthday cake, would have let it go. The 22-year-old girl sitting in her dead car would have nodded just to keep the peace. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I placed my fork down gently on my plate. Really? I said, my voice quiet but sharp enough to cut through the restaurant's low hum. Because I remember being told my ideas were a waste of time. I remember being told my passion wouldn't pay the bills. His smile faltered, just for a second. I was tough on you to prepare you for the realities of the real world, he blustered. It looks like it worked. Is that how you remember it? I continued, my gaze unwavering, leaning forward slightly. Because I remember being told to get out and never come back. I remember my car breaking down 6 blocks from your house and having nowhere to go. I also remember, just a few years ago, when my company was on the verge of bankruptcy from a bogus lawsuit, the only person I could rely on was myself. I paused, letting the words hang in the heavy air between us. I didn't succeed because of you, Dad. I succeeded in spite of you. The table fell utterly silent. Richard's face was a mottled, unhealthy red. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time in his life, the great orator was speechless. Nathan was staring at his plate, his knuckles white where he gripped his fork. My mother, Grace, had tears silently streaming down her face, making no move to wipe them away. I stood up, placed my napkin on the table, and without another word, I walked out of the restaurant and into the cool Denver night. I had finally said it. And I was free. Later that night, I got a long text from Nathan. It wasn't just a simple platitude. I was a coward that night, it read. And I've been a coward ever since, letting him dictate my life, too. I'm so sorry, Emma. I am so proud of you. It was the beginning of us finding our way back to each other, not as the golden child and the black sheep, but as equals. My relationship with my family began to heal, but it was a slow, deliberate process, and it was entirely on my terms. My mother came to visit me in Malibu a few months later. She didn't talk about the money or the house. Instead, she brought me a painting, a beautiful, vibrant abstract landscape. It was the first thing she'd painted in over 20 years. Seeing you follow your passion, she said, her voice thick with emotion, it gave me the courage to find mine again. We were finally rebuilding our relationship, mother and daughter. My father and I, it remains complicated. He never truly apologized, not in the way I needed him to. But the balance of power had shifted, permanently. He was no longer the sun around which our family uneasily orbited. After my 3-year commitment to Privacy Guard ended, I left. I took some time off, and then I started a new company, a nonprofit called EdSecure, focused on creating affordable cybersecurity training for schools and other nonprofits. I met Michael, a wonderful man who founded a nonprofit that brings STEM education to underserved communities. He loved me for who I was, not for the number in my bank account. My life is full now, in a way that has nothing to do with money. It's full of love and purpose and a quiet, hard-won peace. Last week, I was standing on the balcony as the sun came up, painting the sky in impossible shades of orange and pink. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. I glanced at the screen. It was a call from my father. For a moment, I hesitated. The old reflex to answer, to manage his emotions, flickered inside me. Then, I smiled. I hit the ignore button, took a sip of my coffee, and turned back to watch the sunrise. This was my path. This was my peace. And it was more beautiful than I ever could have imagined. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I truly hope it connects with some of you out there. I'd love to know, have you ever had to choose between your own dreams and someone else's expectations for you? Let me know your story in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please give this video a like and subscribe for more. It would mean the world to me.